because using the same technique he claimed in 1975 to have discovered the first human retrovirus HL23, but which turned out to be nothing more than pieces of DNA from 3 different sources of contamination. 28. Nowadays, even an undergraduate would know that if you added DNA to a cell culture, part of the DNA would be incorporated into the cells without any virus being involved. What does the AIDS test actually test for? Since HIV has been shown to be a laboratory artifact, it must be assumed that, when not just cross-reacting with other known antibodies, the AIDS test detects antibodies against proteins produced in the procedure itself. They must be of human origin, because the cells used originated from leukemic patients. Test positivity, logically, results from immunological contact with them. However, since positivity actually correlates with otherwise unrelated factors such as rheumatism and sunbathing, no specificity can be ascribed to the test. 29. Whether antibody positivity really correlates with disease as is commonly supposed, remains to be determined by a critical re-evaluation of the data. Condoms, therefore, serve only to protect against venereal diseases and as contraceptives, and worse, lull the user into a false sense of security by ignoring real dangers he may be exposing himself to. Redirection of AIDS research. AIDS research is therefore back at square one and not at basic science as suggested elsewhere. 30. The main players have since 1993 begun to slink off, arguing that the virus having mutated so much is now no longer detectable. AIDS has therefore to be explained in the absence of further whole virus. 31. Apart from the shortcomings of the antibody test, other misconceptions such as T-cell counting exist, which mean that the whole concept of AIDS needs to be completely revised. 32. It must be shown that there is any point in renaming a collection of known diseases as AIDS, just because someone is positive in the antibody or genetic PCR tests. Leaving HIV out of the picture explains why the epidemiological projections, which years ago had forecast a worldwide epidemic, have been a complete failure. Africa in 1986 was held up as a dire warning of what would befall the Western world. There, AIDS was diagnosed by a combination of clinical conditions, 33, such as chronic fevers, diarrheas, coughs and weight loss, all symptoms of the diseases of poverty, without testing for HIV antibodies. 34. It should hardly come as a surprise that an entirely different definition produced a different outcome. Finally, the effect of a positive test result on mental and physical health needs to be considered and investigated. 35. Antivirals. Whatever happens, the use of AZD and other antivirals which are supposed to target HIV replication, but actually kill cells indiscriminately, and ultimately the whole body, must be stopped immediately. It is especially distressing to note that AZD and its analogues preferentially attack those cells which divide most rapidly, namely, cells in the intestines causing diarrhea and malabsorption of food, and in bone marrow, ironically, the primary production site for cells of the immune system. 36. The people who need enlightenment. The most important and delicate task is to convince HIV positives that their test result is not a death sentence, to be generally supportive of them, to assuage their anxiety and to help them understand that with appropriate treatment of any specific disease, they have a good chance to retain or regain their health. The large number of long-term positives, whose condition cannot be explained by conventional AIDS theory, as well as the phenomenon of seroreversion, return to negative test status, provide eloquent testimony to this. HIV/AIDS researchers and health officials are herewith called upon to debate the whole subject of HIV/AIDS openly and humanely, and to recognize the mistake that immune deficiency was acquired by an infectious agent. The future, to be able to live a fuller life, we have first to regain and then retain autonomy over our bodies and health from self-appointed experts, who have dispossessed us of it. 37. If we refuse to learn from what has happened in AIDS research and related medical policies, then worse is on the way. Some of it is, indeed, here already. 38. The genetics agenda begun in the 1860s. 39. And a primitive genetic determinism have become established through the availability of genetic sequences, and the ability to manipulate them. easily, which are, in fact, pure fantasy. 40. Furthermore, all models of genetics and associated technologies, e.g. genome therapy, are based on a one-dimensional static model of genetics which is a crass oversimplification, not defensible even when Mendel first proposed it. 41. Health is a virtue. Ivan Illich. Health designates a process of adaptation. It is not the result of instinct, but of an autonomous yet culturally shaped reaction to socially created reality. It designates the ability to adapt to changing environments, to growing up and to aging, to healing when damaged, to suffering, and to the peaceful expectation of death. Health embraces the future as well, and therefore includes anguish and the inner resources to live with it. Health designates a process by which each person is responsible, but only in part responsible to others. To be responsible may mean two things. A man is responsible for what he has done, and responsible to another person or group. Only when he feels subjectively responsible or answerable to another person, will the consequences of his failure be not criticism, censure or punishment but regret, remorse, and true repentance. The consequent states of grief and distress are marks of recovery and healing, and are phenomenologically something entirely different from guilt feelings. Health is a task, and as such is not comparable to the physiological balance of beasts. Success in this personal task is in large part the result of the self-awareness, self-discipline, and inner resources by which each person regulates his own daily rhythm and actions, his diet, and his sexual activity, knowledge encompassing desirable activities, competent performance, the commitment to enhance health in others. These are all learned from the example of peers or elders. These personal activities are shaped and conditioned by the culture in which the individual grows up. Patterns of work and leisure, of celebration and sleep, of production and preparation of food and drink, of family relations and politics. Long-tested health patterns that fit a geographic area and a certain technical situation depend to a large extent on long-lasting political autonomy. They depend on the spread of responsibility for health habits and for the socio-biological environment. That is, they depend on the dynamic stability of a culture. The level of public health corresponds to the degree to which the means and responsibility for coping with illness are distributed among the total population. This ability to cope can be enhanced, but never replaced by medical intervention, or by the hygienic characteristics of the environment. That society which can reduce professional intervention to the minimum will provide the best conditions for health. The greater the potential for autonomous adaptation to self, to others, and to the environment, the less management of adaptation will be needed or tolerated. A world of optimal and widespread health is obviously a world of minimal and only occasional medical intervention. Healthy people are those who live in healthy homes on a healthy diet in an environment equally fit for birth, growth, work, healing, and dying. They are sustained by a culture that enhances the conscious acceptance of limits to population, of aging, of incomplete recovery and ever-imminent death. Healthy people need minimal bureaucratic interference to mate, give birth, share the human condition, and die. Man's consciously lived fragility, individuality, and relatedness make the experience of pain, of sickness, and of death an integral part of his life. The ability to cope with this trio autonomously is fundamental to his health. As he becomes dependent on the management of his intimacy, he renounces his autonomy and his health must decline. The true miracle of modern medicine is diabolical. It consists in making not only individuals, but whole populations survive on inhumanly low levels of personal health. Medical nemesis is the negative feedback of a social organization that set out to improve and equalize the opportunity for each man to cope in autonomy and ended by destroying it. Acknowledgements. This article is dedicated to Ivan Illich and Thomas McKeon. Had their writings been taken more seriously, the world would have been spared the AIDS panic as well as other perversions. I would also like to thank Volker Guildmeister, Medical, London, for translation and constructive criticism, and of course my family, Hans Walter Wiegand and other friends too numerous to list, for all their support.